I'm Richard,
I'm Gary.
and we are here to review Phantasm 4. And we just finished watching Phantasm 4, and this will be my second time seeing Phantasm 4,
And my first time.
and his first time. I saw it back in 1998, but then hadn't seen it then, and I remember liking it. This time, the movie was very different. Had a very different mood to it. And it was actually kind of there wasn't as much action.
No.
It was at a slower pace. I think it's because it was building to the discovery of the Tall Man, because this is when we learned more about the Tall Man. So, as traditional with Phantasm movies, we began with the recap of the events that occurred in the previous. But this time, the recap was Mike, and Mike was thinking about back at all the events that occurred in Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. We got flashbacks from all of those three movies, and then we got a replay of the end of Part 3, where Reggie was being held up with all the Sentinels. Sentinels. And the Tall Man just lets him go because he says it wasn't ready. So he let Reggie go.
Which is never really explained.
Yeah, was odd. So
unless that's what's supposed to be in the next movie.
Yeah.
I thought that the recap was weird. I thought it was different than the others. It felt stylistically different than the others.
Yeah.
Not so linear.
Right. So after that happens, so basically the story is just Mike and Reggie separated. So Mike is in the hearse driving away, and Reggie drives away in his own car. So basically they don't know where each other are. Mm-hmm. The hearse takes over, and basically Mike is driven to Death Valley, and Reggie is trying to make his way. We don't even know how he finds his way to.
Right, because he chooses not to follow Jody.
Yeah, he doesn't. I don't remember. I don't know how Reggie knows that Mike is in Death Valley, but somehow his trip leads him there. But before that, Reggie meets this cop, this undead cop, and fights the undead cop and kills the undead cop. And then he meets this girl and rescues this girl that's crashed in a car, takes her to an abandoned hotel, and then the girl dies. But after these orbs come out of her boobs and fly around and start attacking Reggie, and then Reggie destroys the orbs and then destroys the girl, and then he moves on.
I think this is another case of I think that she was a plant. That I don't think that she died then. I think that she was already like the other girls from each of the other movies. Mm. Although we didn't really have that with the third one, did we?
Did we have a plant?
I mean, I thought that Rocky was going to end up being one, but she didn't.
No.
So that's the only movie that they didn't do one.
Oh, and that's the really interesting thing is they don't even mention the boy from Part 3, who was like a major character, Tim, and he's pulled through the glass at the end of Part 3, but then in Part 4, forgotten about. I guess we assumed that he was killed. Nothing about the boy. While Mike is at Death Valley and he's waiting for the Tall Man, he has a flashback to the Civil War. So he sees an image of the Tall Man and himself, and he's to assume that they had met before in the Civil War times. Mike tries to hang himself, and when he hangs himself, there's a flashback to the first movie, but it's what's fascinating about this movie is they use deleted footage from the first Phantasm movie to fill out the story elements in this fourth movie, and it's pretty fascinating because it actually works.
Yeah.
Because when Mike hangs himself, he has a flashback to events in the first movie when they hang the tall man, which we never see in the finished film of Phantasm, but this footage is actually obviously shot for the movie but never used because Mike is young and it's the actor, and same with Jody, same with the tall man. But it looks like they may have tried to attempted to kill him by hanging him at the first time. So that was really fascinating, and there's a whole scene where he talks to the tall man, and the tall man tells him that, if he lets him down, that he'll go away, and he lets it down, but obviously the tall man was lying.
Mm-hmm.
So not Jody, but Mike, being the little kid, stupid little kid, he believes him and lets the tall man go.
I was kind of wondering if that was a scene, because he cuts him down, but then it ends up cutting Michael down. So I'm wondering if that was more of an illusion. If we're supposed to, as the audience, view that as it's a false memory for Michael, and that in cutting the tall man down, he was actually cutting himself down.
That sounds good. I like that. That's an interesting take on that.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah. So after he falls, he sees a tuning fork. He goes through the tuning fork. Not the tuning fork. They're called the dimensional forks. And so he goes through the dimensional fork, and he goes to the past, and he sees the tall man, which is it's the man before the tall man. What's his name? Jebediah?
Jebediah
Morningside. He sees Jebediah Morningside, who has the visage of the tall man. So it's apparently the tall man before he becomes evil. And he doesn't really talk to him. He just leaves. So that was kind of...
I would have wanted to have asked him a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, Jebediah Morningside was asking him all these questions, asking Mike all these questions, and Mike doesn't say anything. He just goes back through the dimensional fork. And when he goes to the dimensional fork, back to Death Valley, he sees multiple dimensional forks, which they don't really explain what that's all about either.
No.
They're just like many, many, many dimensional forks out in the horizon, and no explanation as to what that is.
Yeah, this movie did I thought it left you with more questions. More so than the other ones.
Yeah. So while Mike is in the desert contemplating what's going on, he discovers that he has these mental powers and he's able to move things, kind of like what the tall man does. Jody shows up several times and he converses with Mike, and Mike has having difficulty trusting Jody, but Jody's basically saying that he didn't die in a car crash. He was taken by the tall man. I guess basically saying that he's not under his own control, that the tall man is controlling him, and he was taken. And then we also find out through Reggie's actions that he can destroy the Sentinels with his own tuning fork. Reggie finally arrives in Death Valley and finds Mike. How? Don't know. But he finds him, and he starts prepping, and he puts on his ice cream man outfit.
Which was totally bizarre. Made no sense. We saw it in the first movie, which made perfect sense because he was the ice cream man. But to have him put it back on, it's like, it's never been a thing in the second or third movie.
Right.
It didn't feel like it was some kind of like special armor to him. That was just completely...
It was like a throwback.
Weird.
And at 1 hour and 7 minutes in the movie, Reggie, Mike, and Jody are reunited. And Mike basically tells Reggie not to trust Jody. Reggie gives his tuning fork to Mike secretively. And then Mike and Jody go back through the dimensional fork and sees Jebediah Morningside as he's prepping to go into go through the tuning forks that he created, and they're unable to do anything because Jody reveals that they're in a different dimension. Because Mike was going to try and kill Jebediah Morningside before he went through the tuning fork, but he couldn't do anything. So Jebediah goes through, and then the tall man comes out with a sentinel. So it's cool that we got a reveal about the tall man and that he's Jebediah Morningside, but there's still no revelation as to when he goes through the dimensional forks and comes back out, what happens.
Maybe that's what we'll finally get in Ravager?
Hopefully. So after the tall man goes through the dimensional fork, Jody grabs Mike, and they go through the dimensional fork again. And then they're in the mausoleum. Right? And he's tied down, and Jody's helping me realize that Jody is the undead working for the tall man. And the tall man uses the sentinel to try and cut into Mike's head again. And Mike uses the tuning fork, strikes it, and it stops the tall man and stops Jody. So Mike is able to free himself, and then he stabs Jody, and Jody falls, and that's when Jody reveals that he's already dead, that he had died and actually died in the car crash. So it's kind of sad, because all this time that Jody's come back, he's just been working for the tall man. So it's kind of a bittersweet ending for Jody. So to learn that he's just been dead in the car crash the whole time. And then Mike goes back through the dimensional forks back to Reggie and sets up this device that's in the hearse and gets ready, and the tall man comes through, goes near the hearse, and the hearse blows up. And so Mike thinks that he blew up the tall man, which we know the tall man can't die, because every time they kill the tall man, another one comes through the dimensional fork, which is what happened again. He comes through the dimensional fork. So, and for some reason Mike is surprised. I don't know why he's surprised by that, because it happens every time. Every time they try to kill the tall man, he comes back through. So he's able to incapacitate Mike, and then finally takes the orb out of Mike's head, which is what he's been wanting to do for these two movies, and he leaves through the dimensional fork. And unfortunately, Mike is dying, and Reg is going to try and save Mike. So what he does is Reggie goes through the dimensional fork, and when he does that, we get a scene from the past from little Mike and younger Reggie. Younger Reggie picks him up in the ice cream truck. And it's a really fascinating scene, because it was another scene that was obviously deleted from the first Phantasm. And they just get into the car, they get into the truck, and they drive away. But then they work in the way Mike is dying at the end, and you hear Mike saying "help me," and then Reggie reacts to it like he's hearing the voice. And it's pretty fascinating how they worked that. It's pretty amazing how they did it. I really like that. That was my favorite thing about this movie, is that they worked in those deleted scenes from Phantasm.
There were just things that I thought were weird. The flashback of Jody, Michael, and Reggie. They did all this work to pull these flashbacks, and they decided to throw the one with them sitting on a car drinking beer and playing music,
which doesn't make any sense.
But it's not a flashback, because it's all their current selves.
Yeah.
Doing it. So
maybe it was an imagining of what life would have been like
if they had all lived.
Yeah. If Jody had lived and they weren't dealing with the tall man.
Yeah. And then I thought it was so gross seeing the yellow blood go into Reggie's mouth.
Oh my god. Yeah, that was such a gross moment.
It's like they did a lot of off-screen kills, but it's like that one. It was like, ew.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
I thought it was weird that and maybe just because Reggie didn't understand, they're obviously setting up that Michael. It sounds like that Michael has always been a tall man, uh, like Angus Grimm,
A product
character.
of.
Not I don't know a product of. He's been one of them at some point. So that because he says, uh, you'll know everything once more, and those are the words once more. But then you have Reggie talking about he's transforming, as if it's something new. And the only thing I can think of is that it's just that Reggie just doesn't. I guess Reggie. Well, why would he know? He wouldn't know.
So overall, I like the movie. It's a very different tone. It seems a bit more somber, if that's a good way to put it.
A lot less focus on action.
Yeah.
And more focus on mood.
Mood and driving the story forward. Telling a story. Which is quite different. It's I think I think this one is more in tune with Phantasm, with the first movie, because that one was more of a slower pace and more character driven and more story driven than action. And I think they tried to recapture that with this movie, and I think they did a really good job because it was very moody, very atmospheric.
I agree. I like the movie. I still think Phantasm 3 was better. Phantasm 3 is so far still my favorite.
Yeah.
I agree. I do like I like the use of the deleted scenes as flashbacks.
Yeah.
I still get a little confused, and I would have liked a little more, if they're going to use all of that, it would have been nice to have had a little more clarity, some explanation, since, they are building an obvious narrative. I would like to understand, because you had the flashback with him being in the car with his parents going to Jodie's funeral.
Right.
But in the first movie, they established that the parents were already dead.
Yeah.
And that Jodie was the one taking care of him. So that was really confusing for me.
And I would say that may have been a false memory because when Phantasm ended, it was Reggie who was alive and Jodie was dead. But then, where were the parents?
Well, I still think if we look at the first one, the parents died. Because, Michael was even saying to Jodie, asking if the tall man had taken the parents, had taken their corpses. That was in the first movie. So it's possible that the parents died, then Jodie dies.
That's true.
And that's all that's left is Reggie.
That's right.
So then for this movie to have a scene with the parents taking him to the cemetery to see Jodie, either that's a false memory.
Well, remember, that's probably what it was, is that undead Jodie was giving him a false memory. Because remember, it wasn't the real Jodie, it was a Jodie working for the tall man, telling him these things. So he probably just telling an untruth. Could be what it is. Hopefully all will be revealed in Phantasm Ravager, the final movie. Until next time, thanks for watching. Nothing? You like to say bye or anything?
Bye.